Hello, Jang Young. And hello to all you Canadians. Thank you for coming. All right, Keith, our global ambassador from Canada. Okay, well, I think we're going to get started. I have 10 o'clock here in San Francisco. Please keep on putting your names and where you're from in the chat and turn on your cameras. And we will get started talking about, do you have entrepreneurial DNA? So I'm Stephanie Marrus. I'm Managing Director of Entrepreneurship at the University of California, San Francisco, which we call UCSF. And I'm very pleased to see so many people from other parts of the world today. I believe all from Europe because it's some horrible time in Asia at the moment, but we are recording so that our friends in Asia will be able to watch this as well. So let's get started here. I'm not able to forward my slide for some reason. Okay, got it. Okay, so by way of introduction, I run the entrepreneurship program at UCSF. I've been doing that for a number of years now. I came in from private industry. My background is purely private sector, but I found I have a great passion for teaching people who want to start companies about how to do that. And so, could you please go on mute, whoever that was? But we are taking questions in chat. So I'm part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem, and one of the things I've done while at UCSF is make sure that we have a lot of visibility, and we've become the primary life science and healthcare player in this ecosystem. I've spent over 25 years in various business roles in life science companies. I've worked for venture capitalists. I've been CEO. I've been chief business officer. I've done lots of deals. And it's all a wonderful way to get science out into the world, which is my passion. I'm also at the US State Department. I'm part of their speaker program internationally, and I've done training in various parts of the world. I have a passion for this global entrepreneurship scene. So I'm especially glad to be able to offer this global course. And my master's degree, MBA, is from Wharton. So for those of you who are not familiar with UCSF, we are a graduate school only for life sciences and medicine, and very highly ranked in the world. We're 15th top university in the entire world. This is according to the 2021 US News and World Report rankings. We're the #1 public university for National Institutes of Health funding, meaning our researchers are well funded to do groundbreaking research. And we're the #3 best university for clinical medicine. So we have hospitals and a large number of clinicians who deliver very top care to people. We also have 6 Nobel laureates. So we are a powerhouse in life science and medicine. My program has been about training and company creation. And over a 5-year period, we've actually started 40 companies that have raised over $750 million. So they've been successful out in the investor marketplace. We have a great Silicon Valley investor and expert network, which I've developed over the years. And the people we bring to teach in our classes and mentor are actual practitioners, not academics in any way, but people who are actually out doing things, starting companies, investing in companies, advising companies. That's the network we have. With over 200 mentors and advisors. And the San Francisco Bay Area is still the fastest growing life science cluster. We're always in a competition with Boston, but look how we've outpaced them. And this data is 5-year life sciences employment growth, just brand new data from this past year. And so we are still the number one point for life science startups in the world. So let's go into what we're discussing today, entrepreneurial DNA. In April 2020, the month after the pandemic hit the US, my boss's boss told me the university was in dire financial straits due to COVID, and I was unlikely to have a job much longer. Entrepreneurship at UCSF was about to be defunded. Oh my God, I thought, we're in lockdown. I'm about to lose my job and no one will be hiring. I can't go anywhere or do anything because of COVID. I absorbed this information for the next 2 days, and then I snapped into action. I simply couldn't accept my certain fate and needed to take control over my life. So I came up with an idea. Why not take my popular free UCSF course called Startup 101, which had given birth to these many companies, and translate it into an online course that I could charge for and bring in revenue to pay for myself and make it global. Like, why not? We're all online, we're all stuck at home. So I conducted 24 interviews over the next few weeks with US and global contacts. And I asked them, what if there was a life science medical entrepreneurship course that featured Silicon Valley experts delivered live by Zoom and was targeted to professionals with busy lives? We could record the lectures if people couldn't attend. Were lectures alone enough? What would I be able to charge? My interviews gave me important feedback that helped refine the initial concept. So my next step was to create a marketing piece outlining this imaginary course and its benefits. It was pure fluff. Since I didn't have a course, I didn't have permission to launch one, and I didn't even know if I'd still be employed. But that's okay. Good entrepreneurial practice is to test a concept before executing it. So I wrote the brochure and circulated it to my network on June 1, asking them to check a box if they were interested in the class. It was in a race against time to prove the concept, thinking every day that management would tell me my job was cut. I worked nonstop. It started to look promising by July, with signups building. I kept informing my boss about the numbers, and by the end of August, the list had grown to 437 people from 21 countries. I begged for permission to convert this interest to revenue and finally got the go-ahead on September 7 after our Labor Day holiday. I held my breath. Would the conversion rate be 10%, 30%? I had absolutely no idea. So I hit the go button and ended up with 113 paying students from 13 countries and 4 continents, a conversion rate of 26%. We launched the class on September 28, 2020. That was our first cohort. It's been a resounding success, and we're now enrolling our third, building a global network of entrepreneurs from our Silicon Valley base. So how did I do this? With no budget, no staff, and waiting for the axe to fall? The only answer is, I'm an entrepreneur. I fit this definition. Orchestrate through their own personal gumption, initiative, and resources with a degree of insanity, an effort to turn a business concept into a business reality. I don't ask for permission. I break rules. I move fast. I ignore procedure. I'm impatient. I'm focused. I get bored easily. I thrive on work. There's been a lot of research on the entrepreneurial personality. One controversial theory is that entrepreneurship is genetically determined. A decade of twin studies has found that roughly 40% of entrepreneurial tendency is genetic. But the field doesn't agree on this statistic. However, my anecdotal data is that many entrepreneurs come from families where one or both parents are entrepreneurial. One of my former Startup 101 students, a postdoc then and now CEO of a biotech company, grew up in Alaska. His father is a bush pilot, and at the dining room table, they talk about business. No surprise that he was outstanding at business concepts and picked up the lingo quickly. When he finished the class, he could pitch like a pro. Zach Hill went on to found Soteria Biotherapeutics and has gained praise from his top-tier investors. Although his father operated in a completely different domain, he gave Zach his entrepreneurial instincts. The world's most widely used personality tool is Myers-Briggs. It assesses people on 4 dimensions. Do they focus on the outside world or their inner worlds? That's extrovert or introvert. Do they focus on basic information or do they prefer to interpret and add meaning to that information? Do they look at logic and consistency or people and circumstances when making decisions? And do they prefer to decide things, decision makers, or stay open to new information and options? Each dimension is given a letter, so the personality type has a 4-letter identifier. So what do Silicon Valley entrepreneurs look like? Well, everyone recognizes Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. They are, in the Myers-Briggs scheme, INTJs, introverted, intuitive, logical thinking, and decision makers, or judging. Many Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who are techies and scientists are introverted, but they have to teach themselves to be good communicators to succeed. Steve Jobs was an ENTJ, the same as Zuck and Musk, but an extrovert. And in a study of 617,000 people sorted by state, take a look at the dark green, ENTJs were overrepresented in California. We can extrapolate that this means Silicon Valley. I'm going to pause here for a minute to see if there are any questions in the chat. Anil, do you see anything in the chat?
Not yet.
Okay, all right, please put your questions in the chat and we will try to answer them as we go along and also afterwards. So let's delve more into this entrepreneurial personality. What does entrepreneurial DNA actually look like? First, passion. Passion is innate. It can't be learned or acquired, and it's essential for success in any venture. In our medical and scientific world, entrepreneurs may have a personal health-related motive. So take the story of John Crowley. Shortly after graduating from Harvard Business School, his first child was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease known as Pompe. A few weeks later, his newborn child was also diagnosed, and both children were given only months to live. As a rare disease, there was little research into Pompe and no treatments available. Crowley, trained in finance and working for Bristol Myers Squibb, set about looking for a way to save his children. He ended up leaving his job, bet on some speculative research by a scientist in Oklahoma, founded a company, raised money, was acquired by a major company called Genzyme, and ultimately it succeeded in clinical trials, bringing a drug to market. John's daughter, Megan, is now a graduate student. You can see her here when she was young. John had a passion to succeed. It's a really inspirational story, what he was able to do. You know, a startup's pathway is never straightforward. There's so many bumps in the road. The science may not cooperate, the market may not materialize, a co-founder may not work out. And an entrepreneur has the ability to get up, dust themselves off, and learn from their failures. They'll ask, what went wrong? How can I succeed next time? Instead of giving up. Consider Thaddeus Allen, who founded Tradewind Bioscience. Thaddeus was a postdoc at UCSF when he decided to pursue a novel approach to treat ovarian cancer. He presented a very tight scientific case and some proof of concept data for why his science could be a therapeutic. But investors didn't bite. One investor suggested he needed a different proof of concept experiment, which Thaddeus performed even though he didn't agree with the approach. And he was right. The results were mediocre, and the investor passed. So there was Thaddeus, hugely disappointed. He took a consulting job to bring in income, but in the background, he kept looking for more data to validate his approach and applied for various ways that he could expand his company. Then he had the good fortune to apply to Y Combinator, a famous Silicon Valley accelerator. And he became one of the 2% that got accepted, gaining some funding from them, and especially important, a powerful network. 3 years later, he's still consulting and trying to progress his startup. He just received a US government grant. He's got some major investor interest, and he's nabbed valuable lab space. Thaddeus never gave up. That's resilience. Or as Thaddeus says, when I told him about this talk, he said, it's persistence or stupidity. That's Thaddeus, if you are here in the audience, please say hello. I invited him. So another great example of persistence is the path of Dan Barry, a NASA astronaut. Flying into space was his childhood dream. He started applying to become an astronaut at age 23, and it took him more than 15 years of applications and rejections before he was finally given the opportunity for an interview by NASA. Like an entrepreneur, Dan had a low fear of failure and was tenacious. He made it happen. Entrepreneurs need to be flexible. Things change, people change, situation changes. Science goes in and out of favor. New data may not support your thesis. Entrepreneurs have to be able to take in new information and act on it. Many companies pivot from their initial idea to something that seems more promising or more invested in. One of our spinouts, Endocrine Bio, headed by UCSF researcher Gopika Nair, started with the goal of developing a stem cell-based therapeutic for diabetes. This was her passion. Investors shied away from the high investment required for stem cell manufacturing, but they liked the idea of a platform that could generate multiple leads. So Gopika created a platform plan and is working on landing a seed round, but still holds on to her goal of using the platform to discover a therapeutic candidate that the company can pursue. So I'm going to cover a number of other personality attributes that characterize entrepreneurs. First, they have self-confidence. Entrepreneurs believe in themselves and their abilities. A winning combination is combining that confidence with humility. Big egos don't play well. Drive and energy. Not 9-to-5ers. Entrepreneurs work as much as it takes to accomplish their goals. We work at night and on weekends when necessary. Investors don't applaud it when an entrepreneur says, look, I cut off at 5 p.m. because I need to be with my family for work-life balance. If work-life balance is your goal, go to work for a big corporation or an academic institution. That's not the life of an entrepreneur. Salesmanship. If you're currently a clinician or scientist, your life isn't about selling. Patients come to you if you're a clinician. You get a grant and you can go off to your lab to do research as a scientist. Or your corporate boss gives you a project. As a founder or CEO, you are always selling. You sell the vision to investors, to potential hires, to your board of directors, to your employees. You don't get to hide in a lab or a clinic. Some founders find that they actually enjoy this communication and interaction, and others want to crawl into a hole signed up for. But be aware, this is the life of a founder CEO. Self-motivated. No one has to tell an entrepreneur what to do and in what time frame. Entrepreneurs have internalized the path and they keep plowing away. They are goal-oriented. They don't need to report to anyone for encouragement. They do what's needed to succeed. Internal locus of control. Entrepreneurs believe they have control over the events that influence their lives rather than external forces being responsible. When they fail at something, they don't blame other people or the situation. Instead, they ask, what could we do to get a better result next time? Tolerance for ambiguity. The world isn't always black and white, and entrepreneurs are able to live with the gradations. They're comfortable with uncertainty, unpredictability, conflicting directions, and multiple demands. They can operate calmly in an uncertain environment. Risk profile. This is a study of 1,300 people located in a Cambridge, Massachusetts incubator. And it's no surprise that entrepreneurs have the highest tolerance for risk. Look at the top two lines here. The circle to the far right is entrepreneurs. The red box is the CEO or leader of a company, and the triangle is the inventor or employee. So the top two lines, enjoy general risk or enjoy financial risk. Look where those entrepreneurs sit compared to everyone else. And this is in a limited subset of the world because these people are all in an incubator, meaning they're already identified as doing something entrepreneurial. But you don't need to take crazy freewheeling risks. You can do careful market research, a realistic assessment of the opportunity by speaking with customers, and exercise financial caution. But it's true that any startup is riskier than a 9-to-5 job in a large organization. And only you know if you're going to want to take on the entrepreneurship risk. So what do investors look for in their founders? This is very important because the CEO and their team can make the difference between success and failure in a startup. It's one of the #1 criteria that investors look for. They want to see passion for what you're doing, which goes a long way when things get tough. They want to understand your motivation. Why are you doing this? Hopefully it's not for the money. That's not what this is about. This is about, in our world, changing human healthcare, making things better for patients, bringing cures to the market. They want a leader who is still teachable, who will listen and take feedback from them. Investors like to feel that they are adding value. And the way they can do that is by coaching you as the CEO and helping you with their ideas. They're looking for someone who works well with a team, someone who has self-confidence, but at the same time is humble, who doesn't think they know everything. And they want to like you. They will spend many hours in board meetings and one-on-ones coaching you, and they want to enjoy this interaction. So I'm going to pause here for questions. Anil, anything?
Should I ask the the folks here to unmute to ask their question.
Who are
Okay.
you going to call? Why don't you call on somebody?
Mirko, you want to ask your question? Please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Mirko.
Hi, Stephanie. Nice to see you again.
Same.
I just had a question about being an extrovert and introvert, because if I'm thinking about introverts, I think about nerds sitting at home, like doing the theoretical work, and extroverts being outside, networking and stuff like that. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think that there are special benefits being an introvert for regarding entrepreneurship? What do you think?
Being an introvert.
Yeah, being introvert, because to me it seems like being an extrovert is much more like beneficial.
Great question. Mirko, tell everybody where you're from and where you're located right now.
I'm in Paris. I'm at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and I'm a PhD student in biophysics.
Yeah, and Mirko is in our first cohort, so it's good to see him. Yeah, is there a benefit to being an introvert? Well, someone has to do the work. And, you know, a great role for an introvert founder is the chief scientific officer, maybe doing, you know, making sure the science gets done. You still, if you're going to be the CEO founder, you are going to need to be out there telling your story. So much of being successful in a company is getting people to buy into your vision. And introverts aren't very good at that, although they can learn. I mean, look at Elon Musk, who, you know, says, I'm an introvert. Well, you wouldn't know that unless you happen to see that talk he gave. So yeah, I guess you could say that having both is a good balance, as long as you've got an extrovert who's leading the company and can be that spokesperson for it. That make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Good question.
Next, we have Yusuf. Yusuf, you want to unmute and ask your question?
No, Yusuf? Okay. Well, if Yusuf can't ask, Neil, why don't you read that question?
His question is specifically around the talks for scientists. So his question is, I often hear during talks that there is a need of scientists that can talk business. What do you think about that? Based on your experience, do you think there are major differences across countries and cultures?
Wow, that's a big question. All right, let me take the first one first. I do think it's important that scientists understand business, understand enough of business to know what's going on around them, because if you start a company, it's a business and you can't just hide in the lab. Now, I know that there are scientific teams that have scientists on them who really just want to do the science, and you know, you can have team members like that, but if you're leading the team, you've got to understand the business aspects. And that's what we teach. It doesn't mean you have to run the company, but you need to understand what the needs of investors are, what the market thinks of what you're doing, whether the market is a pharmaceutical company that you want to partner with, or investors, or who you're going to be selling to. So yeah, that's a really important skill set. Differences in different places, I'm not sure I have enough data to answer that. I mean, there are parts of the world that are more entrepreneurial and therefore have more of this business orientation because they needed that to proceed in their entrepreneurial ventures. And then there are parts who just, you know, just haven't had that experience. The good news is it's very teachable. So if you're sitting there as a scientist and saying, geez, this isn't me, I don't know what to do. I mean, literally in 10 weeks, you can start speaking like a business focused entrepreneur, just like Zach Hill, who was in my prior class, Startup 101 did. He became amazing at speaking the language that business needed to hear, and that enabled him to get funding. So
Hans,
yeah.
go ahead.
Stephanie, while the
Absolutely. I love that point, Hans. And Hans was in our second cohort, the one that just finished, and is also one of our global ambassadors for the UK. So great perspective and very important. So thanks for making that point.
So Stephanie, I had a question around the personality types. Healthcare and life sciences are unique in the perspective that very often you need specialization, long trainings. Do you think they slightly deviate from your typical example that you gave?
Are they slightly different for personality?
Yeah.
No, I really don't. I mean, that's my world, is scientists and clinicians. That's mainly who I've taught for the last 9 years. And I get it. I mean, it's an amazing amount of training, but there are many who, who aren't suited to do a startup, and they're, well placed where they are, where their career has prepared them for just to deliver medicine and to do research and further basic science, maybe even translational science. But there are others, just because this is their personality, that say, look, I know I went through all this training, I know all this clinical stuff now, but I don't see myself treating patients one by one for the rest of my life. I want to have greater impact than that. I want to be able to change clinical medicine for everyone out there who has a need. And then there are scientists who say, I'm not going to pipette for the rest of my life. What I want to do is take all this knowledge. I've just spent 8 years in training. I want to take this knowledge and then translate it into something that is going to have meaning, that maybe is going to develop a new therapeutic or a medical device that will enable operations or whatever, a digital health app that's going to reach millions of people. So I really think that is the personality type that takes this amazing training that they've had and says, I have a different vision for it. And yes, you need all these things. You need passion, you need confidence, you need flexibility. All those things are very relevant regardless of your type. I like that question. Who asked it, Anil?
That was a question I was wondering about.
Ah, that was your question. All right. Anil, so everyone knows, Anil has taken both cohort 1 and cohort 2 classes and is now very involved in our next class. So he's been around for a while and we're happy to have you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Keith, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you, Stephanie, for this great session. And a couple of thoughts I had just dealing with serial failure. You hear so often the entrepreneur who's repeatedly tried, attempted again, and keeps going despite failure. I think you mentioned that in resiliency. But I was wondering, in terms of curiosity as an attribute, how important that is, or is it important in entrepreneurial skills?
Great. And Keith, introduce who you are and your position in this class.
Yeah, sorry, I'm an alumni of the program, the second cohort, and Canadian ambassador, just looking to spread the gospel of entrepreneurship. So eager to network. And if you are on the call, I see some have entered in the chat who are from Canada. So please speak up. Happy to meet you all, and great network here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Keith. And Keith is an MD. So your question is about how important is curiosity. Well, how are you going to have an idea and find out whether it's a viable idea if you don't take it out there and ask people? So you have to be curious about the world. I sort of doubt that anyone in our world of science and medicine isn't curious to some extent, but maybe curiosity takes a slightly different form here, which is, you know, and something we teach is if you've got an idea, you better figure out who's going to want to buy that idea, to use that idea before you spend your life making this idea into a reality. And so you have to be curious. You have to go out and talk to lots of people. It's called customer discovery, and ask them, is this something that you absolutely would want to have if it were available? And what are you doing now? And so there are a lot of curiosity types of questions that are essential to having a successful venture. So yes, need to be curious.
Just to follow up on that, can you tell the folks, I think, how many customer surveys would be ideal and to prepare us for?
Well, that might scare them away. So I don't want to,
Okay.
I don't want to put that number out, but let's just say it's not 3 or 5. It's talking to lots and lots of people who are going to be relevant for whatever it is you're doing, to save you the trouble of working on something that no one's going to want at the end of the day. It's so worth doing, and we spend a whole lecture talking about it, and also have a study group about it. Okay, next question, and then I'm going to move on a little bit. Is there another question, Anil?
No, I think we covered most of them so far.
Great. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. And thank you for the questions. So now I'm having moving forward problems again. Why is that? There we go. All right. So I'm circling back to my initial story. And I want to tell you about this class that I've built, and which I'm very proud of. We're enrolling the 3rd cohort, as you just heard, and it's starting on September 29th. So this is our fall class. Why would you take this class? People have lots and lots of reasons. Some people are either currently working on a startup or thinking about it. Others want to benchmark on Silicon Valley or just understand how things work here in the Valley. You might have an interest in early stage ventures in general. Sometimes investors have joined the class. You may want to build a global network, and we have over 200 alumni now who are global. So this class has turned out to be a great way to build your network in entrepreneurship all over the world. It's a way to tap into innovation because we bring to you top thinkers in Silicon Valley startups. And you might be new to healthcare. So we've had people join who said, hey, I was in tech. I now have a job in healthcare. I'm thinking of moving into a healthcare company. Just what's this all about? And these are just some of the motivations. The objectives of the class are first to determine if your idea is a commercial opportunity. And this is what Keith just brought up. It's like you have to be curious about it to find out, is there a market for what you're doing? You know, I know so many wonderful scientists at UCSF who think that the thing they've been working on for years and years and years is going to be an incredible offering to the world, but they don't know this little bit about how do you find out if the world is going to want it. And it's absolutely essential. You also need to understand the key elements of a business plan for this type of a startup. So that is an objective. We will show you what those elements are. We will bring you experts to talk about each element. And then you'll need to learn about investor requirements. So most of these companies are going to need outside investment because the amount of funding required is larger than your personal checkbook. And therefore, you need to understand, what do investors need to invest in a startup? And we will teach you that. Various elements to this class. The baseline element is we do lectures on Wednesday for an hour and a half, and that includes Q&A throughout and afterwards with the lecturer. And then we have a number of other elements that if you're time constrained, you don't need to do them. But if you want to experience everything that you possibly can, you'll want to attend. And there's small groups. They're both split up by life science sectors, such as therapeutics, diagnostics, digital health and devices. And then there are study groups that are topic focused, like fundraising or customer discovery or team building. And then I hold office hours, which is a chance to do one-on-ones on whatever you'd like to talk about. I've done career counseling. I've done feedback on where to look for investment. I've done how to take what you're doing now and making it into something that can have greater impact, all kinds of topics. It's an open session. And then there's a curated group of readings. Our guest lecturers come from many elements of Silicon Valley. They're venture capitalists, angel investors, lots of founders and serial entrepreneurs. I've got an IP attorney from one of the top Silicon Valley law firms, pharmaceutical executive talking about partnering, how to partner with a pharmaceutical company, FDA regulatory advice, and reimbursement, which is a big issue here in the United States. But also an issue in the European socialized medicine systems. While it's different, you still have to make a case for reimbursement by those systems. And we have mentors who lead discussion groups, and they come from various parts of the ecosystem. Some of them are serial entrepreneurs, others are investors, others are C-suite executives, meaning chief executive officer, chief operating officer, chief business officer. So we bring to this class the business side of the life science world and medical world. So who should take this class? And basically, there's so many different motivations for taking it in the cohorts that we've run. So the simplest summary is anyone who wants to understand Silicon Valley. Some of these, you may see yourself on the list. You might be an entrepreneur, you're still in academia and just want to explore whether this is a possible route to take your research out. You may be clinical, thinking about how to reach more patients. Some investors, especially investors who are new to healthcare, but also investors who want to understand the United States market. And how might they bring their company to the US? What is it like and what criteria do they have to fit? There are people I'll call ecosystem builders who work someplace in the ecosystem in various spots. And I know there are many in Europe who are in accelerators or incubators or perhaps government. Also corporate managers. We've had a number of corporate employees who are scientists or have another distinction, who just want to understand the world of innovation or are potentially thinking of leaving their big corporation and starting a company themselves. We've had executives in tech transfer. We had the NHS Scottish tech transfer head in our first cohort. So wanting to understand how do you get the technology out to the world. And then startup advisors and consultants, government, economic development, ministries of science and technology, for example, and accelerator and incubator people. And a few things that our participants have said in the past. This is Thomas Vale, who is the chair of orthopedic surgery at UCSF. And he wasn't able to make every lecture, but since we videoed it, he watched them on the weekends. He came to a number of classes. Sometimes he was in the OR, so he couldn't come, but he really liked the class. And he said the speakers were excellent, well-informed, and on point with real-world practical knowledge. And that is exactly what our goal has been to deliver. Brent Sugimoto, who is a C-level executive chief medical officer at a startup in Silicon Valley, said, I wish this class had been available before I joined a startup. I think we taught him a lot of things and a lot of questions to ask that he wishes he'd asked before he signed on for this founding team role. And Sravan Jagumantri, who is the director of clinical science at Sangamo Therapeutics, again, a Bay Area company. He said, this course has been a life-changing experience for me. And he wasn't trying to leave his company yet. He just wanted to understand our world. But the great thing is, out of this, he's advised a number of our students. He knows clinical trials cold, so he's been able to be helpful to them. And he's also a fellow now at a major angel network in Silicon Valley, helping them understand clinical science. So some experiences that are relevant. We have an advisory board from a number of important places in our ecosystem, from Life Science Angels at Angel Network, Novartis Venture Fund, so that's Novartis Pharmaceutical Companies Fund to invest, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, which is an international organization, and an advisor to the European Commission. And we have a number of partners and supporters. Mirko represents Institut Pasteur on this list. And I don't know if anyone is here from Italy, G-Gravity, which is an Italian accelerator, and many other supporters. And I want to give a shout out to our country ambassadors who are part of our new Global Ambassador Program. I'm not sure if you're on this call, please, we've said hello to Hans Hoppe from the UK, Keith Thompson from Canada. Mary, are you on? Give a shout out. Are you there? Blake, give a shout out. Gabrielle is in Mexico, and Gravinda in the Netherlands, and Renato in Italy. So if any of you are here, we're happy to have you and happy that you're spreading the word in your country. So just to review some key facts about the class, it's a 10-week long class. It starts September 29th. They're both online lectures in small groups. It's 100% virtual, online, and live, as well as recorded. We're sensitive to different time zones. So if you're in Europe, 50% of the classes will be at roughly this time, evening CET. If you're in Asia, we will run 50% of the classes at 5 p.m. Pacific, which is not terrible for the Asian market. So, and you can always pick up the rest of the classes in video, or like some of the crazy Europeans who came, even though it was the middle of their night, to catch those 5 p.m. Pacific classes. We're always happy to have people here. You can spend any amount of time that works for you. If you can make the lectures, that's really the most important part, but there are many elements. You can spend a lot of time or a little time. You get out of it what you put in and what you can take. And we have over 200 alumni in the network, and the tuition's $1,150. So I'll stop here. This is the link to get more information about the class and to sign up if you'd like to. That's my email. If you'd like to send me a message directly, I'm always happy to respond. This is our last cohort class picture, and I'll stop for Q&A. Thank you all.
We have quite a few questions. Sorry, before we start, Valentin, do you want to ask your question?
Hi there, everyone. Yes, I had a question regarding, sorry, just give me one moment here.
Yeah, Valentin, where are you? Where are you located?
I'm located in Toronto, Canada.
Great, okay. A key
Yes, so
friend.
thank you for the wonderful presentation, Stephanie.
Thank you.
My question is more based on your personal experience. You know, you've had over 25 years in this entrepreneurial healthcare landscape. So based on your experience, what trait or experience trait in entrepreneurs is more important? Technical expertise in healthcare, a tech background, or a business acumen?
When you say a tech background, you mean tech as in computer science kind of tech?
Yeah, like building software.
Okay, well, I guess it depends what you're doing. Like you wouldn't need that if you're doing a medical device probably, or maybe you would. So you really need a mix, and that's why we have teams in these companies. So clearly someone has to be the scientific expert, right? You can't do the science or build the software if you're doing digital health without having people like that. But at the same time, you need to have this business acumen, which you can be taught. So there's no one thing. What I've found over the years is if you lack the business viewpoint, you're not going to succeed. No matter how good your tech is, you may be off base. You may be doing something that the market isn't willing to pay for because there's no return on investment, or because you have to change clinical practice too much, and clinicians aren't going to change until they go to med school. I'm sorry, young clinicians might change because they're starting from scratch. So there are many reasons, many business reasons for failure. And in fact, there's a study that everyone quotes is that 42% of the failures are because there's no market need. So that's the biggie. And you can call that business acumen, to understand how to get to what the market need is. But again, you don't have to be an MBA. You can easily be a scientist or a clinician, and we will just teach you how to figure out what the business needs are. Did that answer you, Valentin?
Yeah, it kind of did. It kind of did. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. I mean, there's no one black and white, like, well, if you don't have X, you're never going to make it. But what we see sometimes when we start companies is, let's say it's academic research is the basis. The faculty member at UCSF isn't going to leave UCSF, but there's a postdoc who is very passionate about the science. Maybe he's done the experiments, whatever. He wants to leave, or she wants to leave. So the postdoc leaves knowing the science, but the investors say, well, this postdoc is great on the science, but we need somebody with a little more seasoning to run the company if we're going to put $10 million into it. So they may bring in somebody with some science background, but also a business background. So again, it's the team that makes things go.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay.
We have a question. I may be pronouncing the name wrong. Hui Santam, is that correct pronunciation of your name? You want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Hui San. I'm based in San Francisco, but I'm originally from the Netherlands. And yeah, thank you so much for this talk. I had a question about investors because, coming from the Netherlands and your students are also global, it's always been very difficult to come here and get an investor to invest in you, right? And I think in general, it is difficult to get investment in Silicon Valley just because of the high competition you have, right? But coming from abroad, it's even more difficult. And a lot of the times they would say, well, we don't typically invest in the companies from abroad just because they're not familiar with the structure, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it's two questions. So one is that still true? Like, do you believe that as well? And because you say that these investors come in the class and they, talk to the students, is it because they're being taught on how to raise investments, but then they have to move over here to do so? And then the second part of this question is, I'm curious about how COVID may or may not have changed this, because it is so global. And you're saying, yeah, now you're doing these classes abroad. And so does that also mean that deals, because obviously this past year deals were done over Zoom, right? Because not a lot of people would meet in person, as before you have to meet in person.
Two very good questions. And by the way, I'm looking at now, can see you on the screen, and next to you is Suzanne Behiki. And I'm sorry I didn't call you out before, Suzanne. Suzanne is our country ambassador from France. Glad you were here. Okay, so Pisan, so do investors want to invest globally? And the answer is not very many. So basically they want you to be where they are. If you are sitting in, where'd you say you're from? The Netherlands? You're sitting in Amsterdam, and you're starting a company, and you go and pitch investors in Silicon Valley. If they even see you, they want to know: are you moving your headquarters here? Is the founding team going to be here in the Valley? You can leave your technical people in Amsterdam. And in fact, there are technical people all over the world. I mean, the economics are sometimes better to, you know, have founders in Eastern Europe or wherever. But they want to see you. They want to be able to drive. In the old days when we used to drive places, they want to be able to drive for an hour and meet with you. And that's still the case. And you know, there are some exceptions. I know a venture firm in Boston that used to invest in Israel and had an office in Israel and so on. But the basics are, yes, you need to be here. In fact, we had an entrepreneur in our first cohort, maybe second, can't remember, who is based in Europe, and he said, "I'm planning to move to Silicon Valley as soon as I get to this proof point, and I just want to understand how it works. So, you know, I'm moving my team, and that's the way it needs to work." Okay, second question was during COVID. Sorry, could you just repeat that? During COVID, what?
During COVID, a lot of the deals are being done over Zoom, so online.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering this notion, what you just mentioned, that, well, you know, you have to move over here. Has it changed because of COVID?
Yeah. So I've been very curious about deals getting done during COVID because there certainly have been many. And I've had a chance to speak to some of the VCs who've done them. And I said, are these people that you just met during COVID and you've only known them on Zoom, or did you know them before? And my anecdotal evidence is they knew them before. They were still working through their pipeline of founders that they had some relationship with. So, you know, getting a deal done, an investment done, is a lot of it's about relationship building. It's not that you suddenly show up in somebody's conference room, whether it's virtual or real, give them a pitch and they go, wow, this is amazing, we're going to invest. It's about, who are these people? Do I know someone who knows them? Have I ever met them before? Maybe they came and talked to me before they were ready to pitch and said, hey, I'd just like some advice. This is where we're at. When do you think we're going to be ready to go out for investment? That's what they like. They really want to get to know you. So I haven't seen it change. Now, again, there are always exceptions. I've talked to somebody who said, yeah, I've never met them before, and we did this whole thing on Zoom and it was fine. I don't know how frequent that is, but again, my anecdotal evidence is no, that's not happening. Okay, who else has a question? Keith, why don't you make that comment out loud? Oh, and then we'll take over. Yeah.
I said the one skill you come away with from this course is networking, for sure.
Yeah, that's so totally important. It's really about who you know. That's how you're going to get into investors in the first place, is through a network. It's not a cold email. It's not filling out a form on their website. That stuff just doesn't work. It's about the network. And when you're looking for co-founders or employees, it's like, who do you know? And when you're looking for experts, consultants to advise you, it's like, well, who else has used this regulatory person? Oh yeah, I know Louise. I'm going to ask her how that person went for her. So it's all the network. Ofer, would you ask your question?
Yeah, sorry for maybe background noises in the lab currently in San Francisco. So thank you for this talk, and thank you for, I took the course as well, and I can recommend anyone as an international coming in and learning about the ecosystem here in the US. That helped me a lot. My question is on angel pitching and investment versus a VC, more corporate money, and how you pitch there and what the investment, how does those investment courses look like for early startups?
Let me repeat this. You're asking what's the difference between an angel and VC when they make an investment?
When you pitch. So if we go through the course about pitching differently.
Okay, yeah, I can answer that. Almost none. I mean, the angels used to be very different. They used to be people who weren't very sophisticated, and maybe they weren't even in our field. and they were just, or maybe they're just like practicing docs who just didn't have a background. At least here in the Valley, all the angels we see are very sophisticated. In fact, some of them are serial entrepreneurs themselves, and they add a lot of value in terms of just their knowledge, that they can be helpful if they end up investing with you, but they want to know the same things that VCs do. Now, they will look at earlier stage companies, but they've gotten pretty risk averse themselves. So if you come to them and say, well, look, I don't have a proof of concept yet, but I'm working on it, they may or may not be interested in talking to you. So I would just make the assumption that, yeah, they might go in earlier, but you better be as prepared to talk to them with all the right elements of a business plan. So thanks, great question. Actually, that's a great question to end on because we're at the end of the hour. I want to thank everybody for coming today. It was great to have a chance to see you on my screen and know that some of you are here from Europe and some of you are from Canada, and maybe we have someone from Mexico. And again, I want to thank my global ambassadors, and I hope to see you in the class. Please check out that innovation.ucsf.edu global class and see what you think. We've got much more in the information there than I was able to give you in this short time. And please let me know if you have any questions, and maybe I'll see some of you this fall. And a shout out to the alums who joined us. Thank you for being here. All right.